Welcome to Rocky Broad Solar, where we encourage you to make the current flow. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the third generation of Enphase storage, also known as the Enphase IQ Battery 5P. Let's get into it. So the 5P battery is a 5 kilowatt hour capacity battery. So it can store up to 5 kilowatt hours of storage for use at later time in your home. The max continuous output power is 3.84 kilowatts. So that's just the normal running current through your home. That's 3,840 watts. Now the peak output power, you got to be aware there. Enphase is going to kind of advertised at 7.68 kilowatts, but that is their 3-second peak output power. In years previous to the last few years, all manufacturers pretty much across the board only read peak output power in 10-second intervals, and then in the last few years you've got manufacturers kind of advertising these 3-second peak output powers. Some of them have 1-second peak output powers, and even some advertises load start capability these days. So to be clear, this only has 6.14 kilowatts of 10-second peak output power, but they're going to mainly kind of advertise at 7.68, which only can run for 3 seconds, which is enough to start most of your motor loads on site. So the battery chemistry is LFP, or also known as lithium iron phosphate. Now that is the best battery chemistry on the market today for home batteries and energy storage. And that's because it has very low rate of degradation and can be cycled daily or continuously, as well as it has, they're less prone to thermal runaway. So a lot of people will advertise this as a safer option compared to some of your older battery technologies. Each battery has 6 microinverters built in. Those are the IQ8D BAT microinverters. So again, you've got microinverters on the roof for your solar panels. You got microinverters in the batteries for your batteries. And so those battery microinverters are going to take that AC output from the roof, from the microinverters on the roof, transition it back to DC to charge the batteries, back to AC to run the home loads, or discharge to the grid, depending on your scenario. So the warranty, this is a 15-year warranty up to 6,000 cycles. Now that is a long warranty. Of course, they say that it will degrade no more than 60% of its rated capacity. So, other manufacturers might do a 10 or 12-year warranty, but that rated degradation is higher. Enphase is essentially saying, hey, within 15 years, this battery is still going to be rated at 60% of its rated output. The operating temperature is from -4 to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a pretty big window there, but you're still going to want to keep this battery off of sunny south-facing walls, especially in those hotter climates. And obviously in those extreme cold climates, you might want to look for more of an indoor space, even in a garage or a basement. Now the max elevation for this battery is 8,202 feet or 2,500 meters, depending on what part of the world you're in. That's higher than some manufacturers, but if you're above 8,202 feet, this battery is not going to be for you. Now the round trip efficiency, AC to AC, is 90%. So that's saying the AC output of that microinverter on the roof, taking that back to DC through that battery inverter, transitioning back to AC through the battery inverter out to your home loads and the grid. That's a 90% round trip efficiency. But again, I think that's a little, it's not accurately representing that round trip efficiency, because really you want to know the efficiency from DC to AC. So likely from the power output coming out of your solar panels all the way to getting used in your home loads after being stored in the battery is going to be actually somewhere under 90% in all reality. So next you've got the IQ Combiner 5. They also have the IQ Combiner 5C, which has a built-in cell modem. So if you want the cellular connection, you're going to want the IQ Combiner 5C. If you're going to connect via Wi-Fi or Ethernet to your home's router, then you could get away with just the IQ Combiner 5. So each IQ Combiner can take up to 4 20-amp circuits, whether those be PV or battery circuits. And in addition to that, it's got room for a single 15 or 20 amp circuit, really just to power your IQ gateway, previously known as the Enphase Envoy. Now the IQ gateway or Envoy is what takes that power line communications from the microinverters on the roof. They send a high frequency signal down through the PV branch circuits. It gets picked up by your IQ gateway, and that's kind of how they communicate with the micros on the roof and kind of tells them what to do and what's going on. Then your IQ gateway communicates with that IQ system controller and the batteries through hardwired communications. And that is a new feature in this ecosystem. The second gen was wireless only, which meant you really had to keep your batteries, your IQ system controller, and your IQ gateway all within about 50 feet of each other, no more than one single wall between. And even in some cases there, if you had a concrete wall or something of that nature, it could block that wireless signal and really just limited the ability to really mount these pieces of equipment in the locations you needed them in and have them still communicate. So this new third gen version has hardwired comms. Now that is one more chance of human error, because if you don't hardwire them correctly, obviously you're not going to get communications. But when installed correctly, that's going to give you a nice, quick, reliable form of communication that can travel much longer than 50 feet. So each IQ Combiner has a revenue grade production CT built in. And revenue grade is just a really accurate form of production monitoring. And that's basically monitoring how much the solar panels and microinverters on the roof are making at any given time or over time. Again, although it's factory installed, the installer has to physically route the line 1 phase of the PV branch circuits in the correct direction through that built-in production CT in order to get accurate monitoring. And so it's great that it's built in, but that is, again, one more place where human error could be involved on this system. You've also got a set of consumption CTs. Enphase does not offer those built in any of their systems, but essentially you're going to want those installed on the line side of all home loads, solar and storage, except for a few little outlier cases that we may be able to get into at a later time. But essentially, your solar systems serve two purposes. You might have whole home backup, where all of your loads in the home are backed up during an outage, or you may have partial home backup, where you only have a sub-panel of critical loads backed up in an outage. So that's going to determine what happens during an outage. But you also want to be concerned with how is the system going to operate during normal operating conditions when the utility grid is functioning. Now, for those of you that don't get net metering, maybe you live in California or under a utility that doesn't give you a 1-to-1 ratio for the power you give them compared to the power you buy from them, you're going to really want to store and self-consume as much of your own energy as possible. And all that revolves around installing these consumption CTs in the correct location, in the correct polarity, and on the correct phases. So this is a major form of installer error that everyone should be aware of. But essentially, you want to measure all the loads in your home, and that way, if you set up your system to be on a time of use or maximize self-consumption scenario, anytime your home uses any power to any load in your home, your batteries will discharge to meet that load. Again, if your consumption CTs aren't measuring those loads, the batteries aren't going to know they exist, and therefore your batteries are not going to discharge to meet those loads, and instead you're going to be purchasing power from the utility when you could be using your stored solar power that's in your batteries. Next, this third generation Enphase system came out with an additional battery CT, or your 5P CT. So that's going to be landed on the L2 or line 2 phase of your battery circuit with the arrow facing away from the batteries. Again, another form of potential human error, but that's what monitors your battery power, and it has to be installed correctly for the system to function correctly. The IQ Combiner 5 has a 5-year warranty, pretty standard. That pretty much covers the combiner. Next is the IQ System Controller 3 or IQ System Controller 3G. The major differences there is that the IQ System Controller 3 has the ability to connect one PV circuit up to 64 amps and up to 2 battery circuits, each up to 64 amps. Now that is not a generator compatible controller or MID. You can go with the 3G, which then takes one of those battery slots and instead gives it a generator slot. So with the IQ System Controller 3G, you can connect a generator to that, but it's going to be limited to 64 amps, and then you're going to have one 64 amp circuit of PV and one 64 amp circuit of batteries. Essentially, those are 80 amp breakers, also known as 64 amps continuous. So either of those controllers has a 200 amp pass through from the grid. So, your critical loads or anything backed up, you can pull up to 200 amps from the grid during normal operating conditions. Again, 64 amp limit on those connections, whether they be PV, battery, or generator. The last slot in there is going to be your neutral forming transformer and IQ gateway connection, all in one quadplex breaker, which is where you can kind of connect multiple circuits to a single breaker. If you're getting value out of today's content, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, press that notification bell, or leave a comment down in the description below. Let's get back into it. Essentially, the power supply to the circuit board on this IQ combiner or IQ gateway is going to be landed inside the IQ system controller through a little breaker connection. Now that neutral forming transformer is kind of what turns 240 volts of battery current into, current that can be used in the home during an outage where the current isn't always equally distributed on each leg. So if you're using more on one leg than the other, this NFT can supply your home with up to 3,600 watts of imbalance between legs. So this IQ System Controller 3 can only pair up with the 5P batteries. You cannot pair it up with previous generation batteries such as the IQ Battery 10 or 3. And it can only connect IQ 6, 7, and 8 series micros. And again, you cannot connect different batteries to the controller. You cannot mix and match micros. So if you have an old system of IQ 7 series and now you want to add a battery and some more IQ 8 series, unfortunately, you can't do that. So what you'll need to do is upgrade all of your existing micros all up to the same series, in this case IQ 8 series micros, in order to have all solar on your home, charging the batteries and kind of operating all as one system. So Enphase has been in the industry for quite some time now. They are well known for having some bulletproof microinverters. These microinverters almost never fail if installed correctly, and they're just well known for reliability. Also having an inverter under each panel and several in each battery, that just gives you an overall form of redundancy. So even if one goes down, the rest of the system is going to continue to operate. There's not one single point of failure. This battery, this is a powerful battery for the size. Now, the capacity is relatively small, but comparatively, say if you compared two 5Ps to a 10 kilowatt hour battery from another manufacturer, you'll see that this battery really has some punch behind it. It really kind of, 3 5Ps kind of pair right up with a Tesla 13.5 kilowatt hour battery in form of peak power and continuous power. So, they're right up there competing with the strongest batteries on the market today. You've got that lithium iron phosphate chemistry Again, that is the best chemistry on the market these days, and kind of what all home battery storage manufacturers are moving towards. You get that panel level monitoring. So with each microinverter, communicates information down to the gateway and up to the Enphase monitoring portal. So whether you're monitoring this on the app on your phone or on a desktop, you're gonna have that panel level monitoring. Diagnostics can be performed remotely to find out what's going on if anything does happen. And they just have like an all-in-one ecosystem, all-in-one app. So again, a lot of homeowners really like to have one single app to go to all of their sources. Now, you can program these systems to do several different things. You can do 100% backup if all you want is backup power. You can also program the systems to offset time of use rates. That is if your utility charges more for power at certain times of day than others. And so what you can do is store the battery power and save it only for that peak time of use rate. So say your utility charges you a massive amount of money for power that's used between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. You can program your batteries to store up all day long until 5 p.m. hits, and then discharge towards your home to any loads that run in the home for that 4-hour period to really avoid using that expensive utility power. Now, if you're not on a time of use, but maybe you're not getting net metering for your home and you just want to always use the battery rather than the grid and kind of use the grid as your last option, then you would set this system to maximize self-consumption. And again, your batteries would just kind of discharge to the home anytime you're using power. As I tell everyone, there's no perfect system. The Enphase IQ Battery 5P is not exempt from that statement. So for generators must be on the Enphase approved list and fall within specific sizing requirements. So this is advertised as a generator compatible system, but that is not in all cases. That cannot be paired up with a portable generator. And as far as permanent standby generators, it has to fall on the approved list or it cannot be connected. Next, split systems. So a huge limitation is that 64 amps of PV. That's essentially 4 circuits of PV. Depending on your microinverters on the roof, that's going to determine what maxes out at that 64 amps continuous. So each microinverter has a different max output. In my opinion, we're really not getting under 390 watt solar panels these days. For anything really hitting the market these days, you're probably looking at getting a 400 watt or larger solar panel. In that case, you might as well take that Enphase IQ8 Plus microinverter and throw it in the garbage can, because that thing is way too small to be pairing up with a 400 watt or larger panel. Even if it is possible, it doesn't make any sense. So that's going to leave you with other microinverters such as the IQ8M or the IQ8A. They also have an IQ8H. But essentially, 64 amps continuous is saying, hey, you start pressing more than 44 solar panels on the roof, and this system is not for you. So if you're in a home with a massive utility bill, you need more than 44 solar panels on your home. In my opinion, the Enphase system is not for you. So Enphase's solution to this max 64 amps continuous restriction is installing an Enphase split system. Now, what a split system is it's one Enphase storage system that doesn't exceed 64 amps of solar panels, and then one Enphase PV grid-tied system only, that all it does is produce power that may get used in the home instantaneously, and the excess gets sent to the grid. But if you're in a situation where you don't get net metering, that's really not helpful, right? Because you're essentially, if you're not self-consuming that solar power in real time, it's just getting given back to the utility for next to nothing, or in some cases free. So really, in my opinion, No one should ever install an Enphase split system on their home. Even if you get net metering, you never know what the future may bring, and you don't want to just have some separate system that's just backfeeding power to the utility. Another issue with this split system is it's a difficult installation. So this has multiple gateways, multiple combiners. It's monitoring each system separately, and it's got some pretty strenuous CT installation requirements in order to make that monitoring read accurately with these two separate systems, and installers really struggle to get those installed correctly. Next, you've got to install this Enphase power line filter. Now that is because, again, the solar panels communicate with the IQ gateways or the IQ combiner through power line communications, that high frequency signal from the microinverters down to the IQ gateway. But when you have multiple IQ gateways on site and you have solar panels that are supposed to be reporting to different gateways, those communications can kind of get scrambled and find their way over to the other systems, and that can wreak havoc on your system. So what you have to do is install this Enphase power line filter, and that basically blocks power line communications from going from one system to the next. And man, lots of equipment here. Now with split systems, you're talking a ton of equipment on the wall, and it's hard enough to find room for just some standard electrical equipment. If you're installing an Enphase split system, you're gonna have a massive amount of electrical equipment that you're gonna have to find somewhere to mount. So, in my opinion, it's pretty extensive. Split systems aside, I'd say that's maybe another downside of the Enphase system is just a lot of equipment, because it's such a small battery, and those batteries aren't really stackable where they can be like mounted all in one enclosure. You just have a lot of batteries. You have the combiner, you have the IQ system controller. You need to find room for all this. If you have a 30 or 40 kilowatt hour battery system, you just have a massive amount of batteries that you're going to have stretch across your wall. Whereas if you went with other manufacturers, you might just have one single unit bolted to the wall, or maybe a few stacked out deep. So next you have the IQ load controller. Now this was originally created for their first generation Enphase storage systems that were paired with the IQ 7 series microinverters. That was also known as the Enphase Ensemble. One limitation with that, well, you could exceed 64 amps on that first generation system, but it could not be installed in the IQ system controller. You'd have to install it in a backup load center in the home, and then you'd use this IQ load controller so that when the power went out, it would shed some of those PV strings, so that when the power went out, you didn't have more than 64 amps running during an outage. But when the power was on, all the PV was working with the storage system, charging the batteries and kind of working all as one system. So kind of going from the original first generation system, where you could connect essentially as much PV as you wanted and use an IQ load controller to manage that PV, that was a lot better than their current generation, where you're just kind of capped at 64 amps or a split system. Now that IQ load controller can also be used for load shedding. Again, in an outage, when you have loads on site that you need to manage, you don't want to be draining your batteries or overloading your batteries. So you can use that for up to 2 double pole circuits or 240 volt circuits. So up to 2 double pole breakers from your critical loads panel, you can land in that IQ load controller to be shed during an outage, depending on the situation that you program it to. One issue with this IQ load controller is it's really undersized. Usually when you're trying to load shed loads in your home, it's large loads that your battery is going to struggle to run, or that you really just don't want to run during an outage. It can only handle up to 36 amps resistive loads and 25 amps inductive loads. And so, in my opinion, that's just a very weak product to be used for load shedding. But if it falls within those restrictions, it could be a useful tool. You can use up to 2 of these IQ load controllers per system or per IQ system controller. Next, Enphase also has their Enphase EV charger coming out that'll can pair up with this system and also be viewed within the app. I don't have a ton of information on this this time around, but I will in future videos. So, final thoughts. I really like the Enphase system. It's got a strong battery. It's got good chemistry. You can have everything all in one system. It is a great manufacturer with a great warranty. It's reliable. I really like the system, but it does have some major limitations, all that we went over. So it's just not the best system in every scenario. If you're getting value out of today's content, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, press that notification bell, leave a comment down in the description below. If you're looking for a pressure-free, zero-cost quote to put an Enphase system on your home or any other leading solar and storage system, go down in that description below, click on that Rocky Broad solar intake form. Just take a few minutes to fill out the details about your specific scenario, and I'll get back to you within a few days with a zero-cost, pressure-free quote. Again, I really appreciate each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, take care.